A TED Talk. Not a TEDx talk. An actual TED Talk. Oh boy, I can't wait!
Today, I want to tell you about a pressing social issue.
Ah, a pressing social issue. Hit me.
Now, it's not nuclear arms.
Nuclear arms isn't a social issue. More like a global defense issue.
It's not immigration.
Okay. Immigration could be a social issue, depending on the context.
And it's not malaria.
Malaria isn't a social issue. It's a health issue. I'm not even 30 seconds into this TED Talk, and already the speaker is confusing me.
I'm here to talk about movies.
Did you say movies? I love movies!
Now, in all seriousness, movies are actually really important. In film, we can be wildly entertained, and we can also be transported through storytelling. Storytelling is so important. Stories tell us what societies value, they offer us lessons, and they share and preserve our history.
A bit of a grandiose endorsement of movies in general over perhaps documentaries for the preservation of history. But I cannot deny the importance of movies in our modern culture, so I am right there with you.
Stories are amazing, but stories don't give everyone the same opportunity to appear within them. Particularly not stories compartmentalized in the form of American movies.
Okay, so American movies, as distinct from movies from any other country, are precluding people from stories. Go on.
In film, interestingly enough, females are still erased and marginalized in a lot of our stories.
Females, erased and marginalized in a lot of our stories. How many is a lot? And you know, this all sounds very familiar to a couple of other videos I've done in the past, making similar arguments. Let's see where this one takes us.
And I learned this for the first time about 10 years ago when I did my first study on gender role in G-rated films. Since then, we've conducted more than 30 investigations. My team is tired. And I've committed my life as researcher and activist to fighting the inclusion crisis in Hollywood.
Researcher and activist? So you had an agenda through the course of your research. That would tend to put your objectivity into question. It's not necessarily damning, but just something to keep in mind as we arrive at your conclusions.
So today, what I'd like to do is tell you about that crisis. I want to talk about gender inequality in film. I want to tell you how it is perpetuated, and then I'm going to tell you how we're going to fix it.
Explanations and solutions. I cannot wait.
However, one caveat before I begin. My data are really depressing. So I want to apologize in advance because I'm going to put you all in a really bad mood. But I'm going to bring it up at the end, and I'm going to present a silver lining to fix this mess that we've been in for a very, very long time.
I really appreciate that she's already told us in what way we should be feeling about the data she's going to present, rather than allowing us to reach our own conclusions.
So, let's start with the gravity of the situation. Each year, my research team examines the top 100 grossing films in the United States. What we do is we look at every speaking or named character on screen. Now, to count in one of my investigations, all a character has to do is say one word. This is a very low bar. Thus far, we've looked at 800 movies from 2007 to 2015, cataloging every speaking character on screen for gender, race, ethnicity, LGBT, and characters with a disability.
Ah, so these would be the results from this study, 2007 through 2015. You selected 100 movies from each of those years. All right. And what was the main criteria for a movie to end up on this list? Ah, it was the top 100 films from each of those years. Top equated to highest grossing, thus most popular. So that was their metric. The biggest money earners. Let's remember that.
Let's take a look at really some problematic trends. First, females are still noticeably absent on screen in film. Across 800 movies and 35,205 speaking characters, less than a third of all roles go to girls and women. Less than a third. There's been no change from 2007 to 2015, and if you compare our results to a small sample of films from 1946 to 1955, there's been no change in over a half of a century. Over half a century, but we're half of the population.
So across all the years of the study, and across 50 years besides, the numbers have remained level in regards to the 100 most financially successful films each year and the population of their character makeup. Tell me, how financially successful were the films that contained the kind of characters that you prefer?
Now, if we look at this data intersectionally, which has been a focus of today.
Intersection. The conflation of many things into one thing in order to make things seem far worse collectively than they are individually.
The picture becomes even more problematic. Across the top 100 films of just last year, 48 films didn't feature one Black or African American speaking character. Not one. 70 films were devoid of Asian or Asian American speaking characters that were girls or women. None. 84 films didn't feature one female character that had a disability, and 93 were devoid of lesbians, bisexual, or transgender female speaking characters. This is not underrepresentation. This is erasure.
I was going to say, no, this is erasure, and then play a clip from the band Erasure. But that would likely get me a copyright strike, so forget it. But erasure. People are just wiped out of existence because movie characters. Right. And again, how profitable were those films that contain the kind of participants that you prefer? Could it be that there is a proven formula for success in Hollywood movies that is just being consistently repeated in order to achieve the highest return on investment? Is it possible?
Now, when we move from prevalence to protagonists, the story is still problematic. Out of 100 films last year, only 32 featured a female lead or co-lead driving the action. Only 3 out of 100 films featured an underrepresented female driving the story, and only one diverse woman that was 45 years of age or older at the time of theatrical release.
So it's not that women are not in successful movies, it's that they're not in enough successful movies. And then it's the kind of women they are, by race, age, or sexuality, where we introduce our intersectional component, making things seem even worse for already being bad. And remind me, who determines whether a movie is successful or not?
In addition to the numbers you just saw, females are far more likely to be sexualized in film than their male counterparts. Matter of fact, they're about 3 times as likely to be shown in sexually revealing clothing, partially naked, and they're far more likely to be thin.
Predominantly thin, partially clothed females populating some of the highest grossing movies each year. I cannot imagine why that might be. I wonder if our speaker can.
Now, sometimes in animation, females are so thin that their waist size approximates the circumference of their upper arm. We like to say that these gals have no room for a womb or any other internal organ.
Animation. So, you mean fictional characters and fictional body shapes. This is a problem. Got it.
Now, all joking aside, theory suggests, research confirms, exposure to thin ideals and objectifying content can lead to body dissatisfaction, internalization of the thin ideal, and self-objectification among some female viewers.
Some. How many is some? And Hollywood is to blame for this? Should only overweight women be allowed in movies? Would you ideally exclude women from working on films because they're not of the correct weight class? What exactly are you proposing?
Obviously, what we see on screen and what we see in the world, they do not match. They do not match.
Movies and reality don't coincide? You mean I've been murdering Jedi this whole time, but I'm not really a Sith?
Matter of fact, if we lived in the screen world, we would have a population crisis on our hands. So, as soon as I recognized these patterns, I wanted to find out why. And it turns out that there are two drivers to inequality on screen: content creator gender and misperceptions of the audience. Let's unpack them really quick.
How about profit motive? No? So the filmmakers and movie-going audience are at fault for making and paying for what they like to see. Gosh, how can we cure these two groups of their wrong thinking?
If you want to change any of the patterns I just talked about, all you have to do is hire female directors. Turns out that female directors are associated with, in terms of short films and indie films, more girls and women on screen, more stories with women in the center, more stories with women 40 years of age or older on screen, which I think is good news for this crowd. More underrepresented.
Wow, okay. For someone advocating the elimination of discrimination of women by age, that was an interesting joke to direct at your audience. But a joke all the same. But back to the point. Female directors mostly do short films and indie films, you say. Not big, money-making blockbusters that would reside in the top 100 films of each year. Got it.
Sorry. Not... sorry, but not sorry.
Right. Okay. Sorry, not sorry. So, you're not sorry. Got it.
More underrepresented characters in terms of race and ethnicity, and most importantly, more women working behind the camera in key production roles. Easy answer to the problems that we just talked about. Or is it? It's actually not. 800 films, 2007 to 2015, 886 directors, only 4.1% are women. Only 3 are African American or Black, and only 1 woman was Asian.
So, are you advocating for directors to be hired and or passed over based on their gender and or their race? What a progressive notion.
So, why is it so difficult to have female directors if they're part of the solution?
Well, since only about 5% of all directors in Hollywood are women, the fact that 4.1% of the most successful films each year were directed by women is just about right, per those statistics. Isn't that a good thing? Or are you saying that women should be disproportionately favored over their male counterparts?
Well, to answer this question, we conducted a study. We interviewed dozens of industry insiders and asked them about directors. Turns out, both male and female executives, when they think director, they think male. They perceive the traits of leadership to be masculine in nature.
Leadership skills associated with masculinity? Oh, nonsense. Oh, but female executives thought that as well? Females in leadership roles, in positions of power, they still perceived men as directors before they did women? Wow, I'm not sure what the correct way to think is now.
So, when they're going to hire a director to command a crew, lead a ship, be a visionary, or be General Patton, all the things that we've heard, their thoughts and ideations pull male. The perception of a director or a leader is inconsistent with the perception of a woman.
You do not know what they are thinking. But in an industry where 95% of the available directors are male, what do you think the odds are that, when looking for directors, movie executives will be thinking of an established male director? Oh, right. The odds are 95%.
The roles are incongruous, which is consistent with a lot of research in the psychological arena. Second factor contributing to inequality on screen is misperceptions of the audience. I don't need to tell this crowd,
but I'm going to tell you anyway.
50% of the people that go to the box office and buy tickets are girls and women in this country, right? But we're not perceived to be a viable or financially lucrative target audience.
Not a viable or lucrative audience. So 50% of the profits that defined which 100 movies for each year that you studied came from women and girls. Women and girls make up an equal financial voice as men and boys in determining which movies were at the top each year and which lacked all the kinds of characters and directors you would prefer. Golly, I'm not sure what message to take away from that. I hope our speaker can tell me how best to interpret female agency in this regard.
Further, there's some misperceptions about whether females can open a film. Open a film means if you place a female at the center, it doesn't have the return on investment that if you place a male at the center of a story does.
Well, well, well. Are we finally going to look at profit motivations? It took you long enough.
This misperception is actually costly, right? Especially in the wake of franchise successes like The Hunger Games, Pitch Perfect, or that small little indie film, Star Wars, The Force Awakens.
Excuse me for a moment. 2 of your 3 exceptions to the rule consist of movie franchises of intellectual properties that each had a worldwide cultural fan base prior to their ever being released. The Hunger Games and Star Wars made a lot of money, and they starred females? Saints preserve us! Did people go to these movies because of the gender of their main characters, or because of the intellectual property to which they were associated?
Our own economic analyses show that gender of the lead character doesn't play a role in economic success in the United States.
Whoa, wait. Say that again?
Our own economic analyses show that gender of the lead character doesn't play a role in economic success in the United States.
Gender does not play a role in the economic success of films in the U.S. So you and your team looked at the highest grossing films, and you complain about the lack of female characters therein. But gender of the lead character is not a factor in the financial success of a film. So, is that also true for the gender of the director? It's funny how you bury this tidbit right in the middle of your presentation, and then never mention it again.
But what does? Production costs alone, or in conjunction with how widely a film is distributed in this country.
Production budget and release, not gender, but we're still concerned with female-centric films. Well, how about Catwoman, starring Halle Berry? Production budget, $100 million. Released to 3,117 theaters in its opening weekend. One of the biggest box office bombs on record. Or how about Beloved, starring Oprah Winfrey? Production budget, $80 million, and released nationwide. An even worse financial dud than Catwoman adjusted for inflation. Both had high budgets, wide release, and also starred women. But do you know who starred in the most expensive, worst-performing films of all time? Men.
So, At this point, we should all be sufficiently depressed. No change in 50 years, few female directors working behind the camera, and the entertainment industry does not trust us as an audience.
Given the steady financial returns on the character formula you say has been such poison for the last 50 years, it sure sounds like Hollywood has a relatively reliable audience, actually.
Well, I told you there would be a silver lining, and there is. There are actually simple and tangible solutions to fixing this problem that involve content creators, executives, and consumers like the individuals in this room.
Oh, so there are movers and shakers in your audience? So this is a sales pitch? Given that you've gone at length to tell us how the biggest moneymakers for the last 50 years have not consisted of the things you prefer, and that the gender of the main character is irrelevant to a movie's potential success, you've created a very, very steep hill to climb.
Let's talk about a few of them. The first is what I call just add 5. Did you know if we looked at the top 100 films next year and simply added 5 female-speaking characters on screen to each of those films, it would create a new norm? If we were to do this for 3 contiguous years, we would be at gender parity for the first time in over a half of a century.
Add 5. So whatever stories writers create, they need to revise their work to include characters previously unnecessary to the narrative based on gender. Got it.
Now, this approach is advantageous for a variety of reasons. One, it doesn't take away jobs for male actors. Heaven forbid.
Yes, because men never experience unemployment based on quotas or discrimination in Hollywood. And nothing like that would become even more frequent if your ideas were implemented into the industry.
2, it is actually cost effective. It doesn't cost that much. 3, it builds a pipeline for talent.
Adding 5 speaking roles to every film doesn't cost that much. How much doesn't it cost? You went over that one awfully fast.
And 4, it humanizes the production process. Why? Because it makes sure that there's women on set.
So, men on set means the production process is not human. Got it.
Second solution is for A-list talent. A-listers, as we all know, can make demands in their contracts, particularly the ones that work on the biggest Hollywood films. What if those A-listers simply added an equity clause or an inclusion rider into their contract?
So now you want A-list celebrities to contractually demand casting decisions and screenplay revisions be made, even if such changes would adversely affect a film's production budget or the integrity of the writer or director's artistic vision. Got it.
Third solution. This would be for the entertainment industry, Hollywood in particular, to adopt the Rooney Rule when it comes to hiring practices around directors. Now, in the NFL, the Rooney Rule stipulates that if a team wants to hire a coach from outside the organization, what they have to do is interview an underrepresented candidate. The exact same principle can apply to Hollywood films. How? Well, on these top films, executives and agents can make sure that women and people of color are not only on the consideration list, but they're actually interviewed for the job.
So, defining job opportunities by gender and race. Got it.
Now, one might say, why is this important? Because it exposes or introduces executives to female directors who otherwise fall prey to exclusionary hiring practices.
By introducing different exclusionary hiring practices. Got it.
The fourth solution is for consumers like me and you. If we want to see more films by, for, and about women, we have to support them. It may mean going to the independent theater chain instead of the multiplex. Or it might mean scrolling down a little further online to find a film by a female director. Or it may be writing a check and funding a film, particularly by a female director from an underrepresented background.
So, going out of our way to pay attention to things we're not necessarily interested in based on the gender of the director and not the quality of the content they're producing. Biology over merit. Got it.
We need to write, call, and email companies that are making and distributing films, and we need to post on our social media accounts when we want to see inclusive representation, women on screen, and most importantly, women behind the camera. We need to make our voices heard and our dollars count.
I thought it was our dollars that determined what kinds of films people actually wanted to see over those 8 years that you examined. And 50% of those dollars came from women and girls. So, all of those female consumers have just had incorrect preferences this whole time, have they?
We actually have the ability to change the world on this one. The US and its content, films in particular, have captured the imaginations of audiences worldwide. Worldwide. So that means that the film industry has unprecedented access to be able to distribute stories about equality all around the world.
The Chinese government would not allow the recent Ghostbusters movie to be released in their country. Not because of the all-female cast, but because they have a prohibition on movies that involve the supernatural. No amount of Hollywood power could overcome that. And yeah, isn't it lame when rules are imposed that dictate to people what they can or cannot see in movies, even if they want to see it? I sure think so.
Imagine what would happen if the film industry aligned its values with what it shows on screen. It could foster inclusion and acceptance for girls and women, people of color, the LGBT community, individuals with disability, and so many more around the world.
Wow. Hollywood has the power to do all of that? Sure sounds like a panacea. I am sure that The Force Awakens is freeing women from oppression and inequality worldwide as we speak.
The only thing that the film industry has to do is unleash its secret weapon, and that's storytelling.
Storytelling that just needs you to add 5 extra female characters and be directed by a woman. Then it's better storytelling.
Now, at the beginning of this talk, I said that films, that they can actually transport us. But I would like to argue that films, they can transform us. None of us in this room have grown up or experienced a storytelling landscape with fully realized female characters. None of us, because the numbers haven't changed.
You cannot be serious. None of us have ever experienced fully developed female characters. Tell me again, what movie franchises did you highlight as the exceptions to the idea that female-led films cannot be profitable? What was that one small film? Oh, right, The Force Awakens. And what female character appeared in that film? No, I don't mean Rey, I mean Princess Leia. A character that, with Star Wars Episode 8, will have appeared in 6 Star Wars movies spanning 40 years. And I can stop right there, even though there are thousands of other fully developed female characters that have appeared in movies since the birth of the medium. Our speaker's insane assertion has sincerely ticked me off.
What would happen if the next generation of audiences grew up with a whole different screen reality? What would happen? Well, I'm here to tell you today that's not only possible to change what we see on screen, but I am impatient for it to get here. So, let's agree to take action today to eradicate the epidemic of invisibility.
So why aren't you producing and directing your own correctly gender-balanced film right now? Or is it a harder proposition to produce a movie rather than just have a team of people watch 800 films and count characters and lines of dialogue in order to complain that you're not seeing what you would prefer?
And let's agree to take action today to agree that U.S. audiences and global viewers demand and deserve more.
Well, it sounds like they've been demanding exactly what they want to pay for over the last 50 years, let alone the 8 that you looked at. I mean, they bought the tickets to the movies they wanted to see, didn't they?
And let's agree today that the next generation of viewers and audiences, that they deserve to see the stories we were never able to see.
No. You want them to see the stories you approve of, and you want to dictate to writers and filmmakers what constitutes a correct and socially just screenplay or casting decision. Even if it's not what audiences want to see, even if the genitals of the main character have no effect on a movie's success, but simply because you tell us all that it's the right thing to do. If you want to moralize from a stage on the correct ways of thinking, join a church. As always, thank you for watching.